Hello, everybody. We are live here on Tuesday night on the Dr. Boz Show, and we have a great show for you tonight, which had me curious several weeks ago when I started seeing a trend about methylene blue, this blue dye that people are taking on purpose. I think it started with a trend where Mr. RFK was dripping it into his water, and I have thought, why would he be doing that? And so as I look into possibilities, I think it might have to do with his mitochondria. It might have to do with maybe some defense system for helping against viruses, maybe. But I think you should lean in to say, what could it be doing? What are the mechanisms about the theory of how it works? And then what are the risks that you could be doing that would either make you lean in or say, not for me. All right, stick around till the end. We are going to start by sharing my numbers. I did prick my finger right before we got started. Can you see that? Glucose, try that again. My glucose is 71, ketones 2.7, a Dr. Boz ratio of 25. I will be watching for your questions tonight. That we have my trusted team watching for the questions on the topics that we're going to be covering tonight. We have done a little something different. We've had some not so fun messages come into the channel when I go through these lives, and we want to find the people who are serious about helping their health and answer your questions here on the channel. We specifically look for questions that are related to the topic, trying to make sure that what I think I said on a live show might not have been the full thing, and I have shot cleanup several times because you put in the good question. But you'll notice that if you're not a subscriber, we took that away, that you can leave a comment during the live. Again, we're looking for the people who are here and they are leaning in to learn about their metabolism. All right, as usual, I'm going to start with my drink tonight, but I'm also going to put some blue dye in there. Let's see if I can do this with the microphone and the without spilling it on me. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's good. That might be 11. So if you saw the thumbnail, you'll know that I did this earlier, and I I will say that I definitely felt what this drug should be doing, or what this can I call it a drug? This dye is supposed to be doing. And it is been a little bit of a rapid learning curve for me, because the only thing I knew about methylene blue was as a resident, when I was a young physician, I can remember using it in an IV. And I thought, this is right out of a board question, and nobody ever is going to need this question. But we were practicing medicine in Salt Lake City, so up an increased altitude. And I'll show you the story when we get to that part of the slides. But one of my good friends and 50 years in the military with way too many stories, Colonel Auk, if you're watching tonight, I did listen to you. I did buy the book that we're going to talk about, and give credit to Mark Sloan. That link to that book is in the show notes. We covered a lot of what he talks about, but we have done a few more things that that he didn't cover. So I'm going to start by having a drink of this, and I will tell you that I've been taking this over the last 3 weeks, and it does fall over April Fools. So on April Fools, if you've ever seen, just Google methylene blue April Fools jokes. All right, so some bubble water. I put a little pucker up in there. Again, my numbers are that glucose and ketones are after a pretty strong fast. We did have an Easter brunch with the family, but then we went on to what I typically do, which is fast throughout the weekend, or throughout Monday and into Tuesday. So I am fasted by about 60 some hours ish. Yeah. And I will maybe, 60 hours is what I'll say. All right, let's get over to this lecture, because I think it's going to take me a little time to do this. But in the show notes, if you've ever tried this, I want you to say yes or no that you've tried it. But if you did, what made you swallow something that can turn your tongue blue and make your pee blue? I'm very curious, because Well, kernel alk is what made me do it. But as I read this book, and I have looked into several of these articles, I think many of you might do it for other reasons. And we are going to talk about what are you doing? What are you doing deep inside that body of yours? And is it a problem? So this is a forewarning. If you don't like science, you should click off right now, because I used this as permission to talk about the things that I love to talk about. And one of those is your mitochondria. Mitochondria are amazing. And my team holds back because, well, a lot of you click off when I get too sciencey. So I'm going to try not to. But let's just look at the headlines of what does this drug claim? What is this? I can't call it drug because I don't know what else to call it a dye or something you order off of Amazon. Okay, anyway, what does this drug do? And here's the big categories that I seem to lump them into. And the first one is, again, where that story comes from in Salt Lake City emergency room. And that is an antidote for chemical poisoning or overdose. The next one is anti-malarial drug. It does have a great history lesson of that. It is quite the virus warrior, from tuberculosis to malaria isn't a virus, but other viruses that are powerful in disrupting people. The pain relief is what I probably saw the most comments on when I was looking on everything from Reddit to the Twitter files. But also looking at why it claims to be anti-aging, and what is it doing to your brain? Because if you looked at that thumbnail, it's not an accident that I did that. The brain of animal studies, and even those warriors, soldiers that took this for malarial treatment, if their bodies on autopsy were looked at, their brains were blue if they were taking methylene blue. Their hearts were blue if they were taking methylene blue. So we're going to talk about what that means. All right, let's get into the first thing that I like to stamp in the textbooks of, if you ever take boards questions for internal medicine, methemoglobinemia, the antidote is methylene blue, and that is the IV that I used in this emergency room as a young physician, and it was just so imprinted in my mind because it's the strangest thing to look at this blue dye going into the patient. But methemoglobinemia is a very dangerous problem, and it happens for a list of reasons. Let's go through the list of reasons of why. Let's just talk about hemoglobin before I go to methemoglobinemia. Methemoglobinemia is the pathology. That's the problem. But you should probably remember that you have hemoglobin in a whole bunch of your cells called red blood cells. Those hemoglobin strings have those globin strings have little cups of heme where iron can bind. So these little iron things, we did quite a few lectures on this when I was teaching you about hemoglobin A1C and average blood sugars. But that iron deep inside your body is in those cups of heme, on those strings of globin, attract oxygen. And during that delivery of oxygen, it's really important that the iron at the bottom of that cup has two charges. I know this is really chemistry. Hang in there. I'll get you there. So again, I'm reminding you, we're talking about red blood cells here. Although this hemoglobin problem can happen throughout, methemoglobinemia happens throughout the body. Specifically, let's look at what's going on in the red blood cell and how this becomes a deadly, dangerous problem. So this is a red blood cell. If we peel back the skin of that red blood cell and look inside, you have millions of hemoglobin complexes, and they all have oxygen at the bottom of them there. I clicked through that slide a little quickly, but you get the point. All of those little places are carrying oxygen, and when the oxygen gets to your tissue, it offloads to supply the body with oxygen. Yeah, there you go. In the problem with methemoglobinemia is that in this situation where iron is in the 2+ state, I use oxygen here as one place that can become a free radical, but that free radical happens only when you add that extra charge to the iron. And this might seem really nerdy, but it's important for you to see what's going on that this methylene blue might help change. So when people have methemoglobinemia, it goes from a a ferritin or an iron 2 plus to an iron 3 plus, and it's in the presence of free radicals. Free radicals is this word that I think, well, that social media and influencers, maybe like me, have just bastardized this word, free radical. Oxidative stress. And what it's meaning isn't just this glib marketing thing. There's actually something happening inside your mitochondria that create these problems. So let's see, can I do this? All right. I think I'm going to need to switch to this scene over here so you can see this full structure. This is an iron molecule, and this is what it would look like in your chemistry lab. You may have remembered to do the rings of electrons. This center one ends up with 2 electrons, and then the next one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it 7? I thought it was 8. Anyway, whatever. You get electrons in this one. 2, 7. Been a while. Sorry, guys. But what happens is the removal of 2 of those turns this iron into a 2 positive charge. And when you are in the presence of oxygen, it's no problem. That's not going to hurt anything. That iron is able to be a recipient and transfer of this little charge inside your body. And this is all happening without you guys knowing, and that's okay, because who would want to know this, right? Well, when you run out of parking spots, or when the body gets overwhelmed with this electrical charge, with these rogue electrons, potassium or hydrogen ions is usually what it is. Well, you saw that now that ring of iron is rusty. It's now oxidized. And those oxygen molecules now get traded for free radicals, and the iron charge is even higher. Now, my nerds out there will love this. You have now created the wrong environment. This is what a free radical environment looks like. An antioxidant would undo this without becoming a free radical itself. But in the setting of our bodies, there's only so much space for those free radicals, and when to be absorbed, and then the rest of them just run havoc. They run problems in our bodies. And when you look at metabolic dysfunction, it's the acquisition that you acquire too many of these little positively charged protons zipping around and causing problems. So let's look at what are the causes of methemoglobinemia. The first one is cyanide poisoning. Okay, so in the world of cyanide poisoning, in the comments, tell me, have you ever heard of a king or a ruler having a tincture that would prevent him from cyanide poisoning? So maybe my family reads too many sci-fi books, but this is always the theme. I even think in Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin wrote in that, the person who was committed to serving the king, who had all the tinctures, he was giving him the antidote that if somebody tried to put cyanide in his body, he could live through it. And this is real in the history books, that the king would pee blue. Why was he peeing blue? Because he was taking methylene blue. So what does cyanide do? If you've ever seen it in the movies, they're very accurate that they put the pill in, and within minutes, the person is dead. But if methylene blue had been present inside that cell and mitochondria, it would offload the cyanide as fast as it would bind. And if you had the saturation of that body, you could prevent the cyanide poisoning. Now, there's other myths out there that the kings would do, is they would constantly take cyanide so that they would have a tolerance for it. But I think it was very delicate to do that. So the taste of this, well, I have pucker up in there. So the sour is all I'm really tasting. Not too bad yet. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So if you've heard of that if you've ever heard of having the antidote for the king, I would love to know in the chat if your family talks that weird too. All right, so here's the story from what we were looking at in Salt Lake City, is they had carbon monoxide poisoning. Again, carbon monoxide was binding to that spot where that iron was, and the oxygen couldn't get there. And the antidote was methylene blue. Now, it was also hyperbaric oxygen and several other things that we were doing, but that was going to take time. And the methylene blue we could get in the IV as quickly as possible to try and reverse this. Other things are high doses of acetaminophen, that's Tylenol. Formaldehyde. That's what that's what my typing did when I didn't check. It's supposed to be formaldehyde. When you get formaldehyde in a body, it binds in this spot that I'm going to show you in a second. Fluoride also does that. Lidocaine. These are anesthesia. If I numb up your finger to put some sutures in, that lidocaine or benzocaine, it's causing methemoglobin. Now, methemoglobinemia is a toxic level of that in your body. Aluminum and copper, just like those, like the ferritin is 2+ and can really make it difficult for the oxygen to bind. All right, this is the last super nerdy one. My team said you can only do this really quickly. So this little lipid layer here is the inner lining of your mitochondria. And there are these complexes. Here is a protein complex. This is complex 1, and this is complex 3, and this is complex 4. And cyanide completely blocks complex 4. You cannot get these hydrogen ions to go from the inside of the mitochondrial, the inner membrane, to the outer membrane, because cyanide blocks it 100%. There is no getting anything through here. But methylene blue prevents that. Of note, metformin is blocked by, metformin blocks the transfer of hydrogen ions for complex 1. And we aren't going to cover that today, but hang in there. So I've shown you this slide many times. That is a super nerd slide. And for those of you that liked it, I would love to see the praise in the comments, because many of you don't like this. But here's a better way to just lift the rest. Even me, when I'm thinking about this, I will look at, mitochondria are not all built the same. This is a muscle cell, and it's not exactly a muscle cell, but you can see that it's a muscle cell. It looks like a muscle, meaning I made it a cartoon. But in there are 2 types of mitochondria in this setting. Some of them are really healthy, and they are able to quickly fat adapt, burn fat as quick as you'd ask them to. That would be like this guy here. But you also see that this red one here is, the red is to represent that it doesn't burn fuel as efficiently. So at any one time inside our cells, mitochondria are going to be at different levels of health. And I've said this many times, that there's a difference in the way healthy mitochondria look and unhealthy mitochondria look. This one has really beautiful folds along that mitochondria there. That's gorgeous. And that's that place where I had zoomed into with those complex 1, 3, and 4. It's perfect. It's beautiful. And that's where life happens. I did a lecture to several people of faith, and I titled it, "The Holy Spirit is in the wall of the mitochondria." Because as soon as that mitochondrial wall doesn't function, you die. Cyanide is that. Here is an unhealthy one. You'll see that it's supposed to look deflated. This one is supposed to look nice and very taut, very full. It's perfect. But this it's kind of deflated. It's not really strong, and it's got some dysfunction in there. There's some holes in there. We'll get there in a second. So this mitochondria, if I said, let's put some glucose in that cell and watch how it turns that glucose into energy. Oh, there we go. All right. So glucose comes in. Glucose goes to pyruvate. Some of that energy is, some of those electrons are transferred through there, and energy is made by lactic acid and succinic acid. But the majority of that energy is coming from the part where it went up along here, along this, and down here, and that is your electron chain transport. This is why it seems like a panacea. If something trades electrons, it's helping the mitochondria to do a better job of efficiently moving those electrons along. And I've seen several influencers try to talk through this electron chain transport, saying, but you can only see the effect of methylene blue if you have anything that might affect that, if something is blocking that transfer of protons. And I'm like, yeah, no need to worry. You have plenty. If you've been around the sun a few times, you have plenty of examples of how this is working. Now, this is one of those mitochondria that are blue and is more fat adapted. This is what I try to do every week by fasting and teaching the ketogenic diet, being in a state of ketosis. Notice there's a lot more electrons coming out of that mitochondria. It's in the same cell, it's in the same place, but it is very efficient at turning that fuel of fat into Here we have ATP, you can call it energy, whatever. But the way it did that is the transfer of electrons of those hydrogen molecules in and outside that mitochondria, or in and outside that membrane. And that's where methylene blue is effective, or that's where it gets to, at least. The dysfunctional mitochondria starts out looking like this, and when we really zone in, you can see there are holes in this membrane. So again, here's the membrane where the complex is pushing the hydrogen ions out, and then the next one pushes them in, and the next one pushes them out. And it's this transfer of energy that keeps us alive. Okay, so what happens when it goes wrong? Well, if you start with glucose and you shove it through one of these dysfunctional mitochondria, you're going to see, glucose to pyruvate, go into the acetyl-CoA, go to the Krebs cycle. Okay, what happens next? Oh my goodness, there are electrons coming outside. It doesn't make it all the way to this part of the chain. The electron chain transport is broken. Okay, this is the foundation to metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is when your body ages, when your body lets these little rogue electrons out to play inside your cells, and they hurt your DNA. Well, now the gene got nicked, and now it's genetic mutation. Well, how'd that happen? Oh, because you were inflamed. You've got that joint that keeps hurting, and it's been hurting for several months. And when the doctor does a MRI and says, "Well, what's wrong with the joint?" Oh, there's all this bogginess or this swelling around it. What's going on? Oh, inside these mitochondria, you're pulling fluid, and it hurts. It doesn't feel good. Well, how do you get that to go away? Well, you don't leak electrons outside the side of your mitochondria, for starters. So as I look at methylene blue and say, well, what did this drug do? It took that iron with the three empty spots as positive charges, and it returned it back to a much more stable molecule of iron, ferritin, or ferrous 2+, on the periodic table. This is all happening inside the mitochondria. And we took it from a free radical, which is very dangerous, bounces around that cell, causes damage, bounces around our brain, bounces around our heart. If you've got a severe problem of the oxygen can't bind, and I put methylene blue in, yep, I can know that happens. But most people, that's not what they're struggling with. They're not walking around with carbon monoxide poisoning or a tincture of cyanide in them. They are walking around with years of inflammatory problems deep inside the cells. And we talk about, if you want to slow down aging, you do need to get your mitochondria in shape. They need to look this beautiful. And that beauty is right along that membrane here, where you're pushing electrons out and you're pushing them in, and then you're pushing them out. And that's how our energy is made. An intact mitochondria will shuffle those protons along that internal membrane. And that's where people come into my clinic and say, "Oh, how can I have all these problems all of a sudden?" I'm like, you don't have all these problems all of a sudden. You've been brewing these problems for 30 years. Well, how did I do that? Well, the way you've been fueling those tiny little mitochondria, they're running hot. There's nothing that's been running cool. Well, how do I run my mitochondria cool? Well, you got to change the fuel up. When the fuel is only in the glucose lane, man, is it tough on those cells. And your cells are on your side. They don't want you to die any more than I want you to die. But the byproduct of dealing with only that one fuel turns into chronic increased protons in the wrong spot, okay, which is chronic inflammation, which is reactive oxygen species, which is free radicals, all these terms that people use. But I often think the punchline is missed when you say, well, what could possibly be a way to undo the damage I've done in my body? And I'm going to start by saying, if you're walking to the methylene blue link and saying, oh, I'm going to put this in my body and it's going to make all this go away, it's not that good. Stay tuned. There's some problems ahead. I will get to them. So for any physician that's out there or somebody that works in a clinic, My stir stick. I wonder if anybody notices what that is. That's what happens when you're doing a live and you're like, I just need a stir stick and I'm out of tongue depressors. Okay, next slide. Let's go to here. We're getting to the good stuff. All right, so the antidote for chemical poisoning or overdose, that was the cyanide lecture that I wanted to make sure you saw. Yeah, this is complex 4, and that's the one that's blocked with cyanide. It's also a major problem when carbon monoxide is actually is binding to the place on that hemoglobin molecule, and we now need to transfer electrons and to get it off there so that the oxygen can bind again. So looking at those nerdy things, they do really matter. Let's go through the other things that I said earlier in there. So the most, if you're ever taking internal medicine boards, here's a great answer. Methylene Blue is a real treatment. And what is, what's shocking to me is whenever somebody asks me about an antioxidant, I'm always like, oh, good grief. It doesn't do that much. And the reason why is the amount of particles, of molecules, of whatever you think this antioxidant is doing, that it takes to get it inside the cell and into the mitochondria. Well, heck, they're not funded by, major organization or major National Institute of Health trials. They are, they just say, hey, I'm an antioxidant. I mean, which means it might be true that they can grab that energy and put out that one free radical. But you need billions of them in people with chronic disease. To prevent, the aging of the brain, you need millions of them. And when you swallow that acai berry and you say, well, I wonder how much of it's getting into your mitochondria, I would say not diddly. You got to swallow it. It's got to get past your gut. And then your gut's going to port it over to the liver in some cases. And then your liver's going to say toxin, not toxin. So it's going to sweep out a few more. And then it's got to get in your circulation. And then it's got to get through a cell lining. And then it's got to get into the mitochondria. And like, good grief, that's a long journey for a 1-to-1. It doesn't have to get into the mitochondria, but it needs to at least get really close to that mitochondria to help grab that electron, that hydrogen ion. So how do we know that Methylene Blue does that? Well, this, again, been around for a long time. I think of one of my favorite musicals is Fiddler on the Roof. And maybe it's because I'm from the Midwest and there just wasn't a lot of Jewish tradition for me to experience. And I felt these two parents trying to raise kids and kids doing things that the parents didn't want to, and the struggle of why do we do these things? We do tradition. And so you look at some of the Jewish tradition, and when they wear that shawl around their waist, and then the tassels at the bottom of that shawl, they're slightly tinted blue. And it's part of some Jewish ritual. Please correct me, anybody who has a much better understanding of this, but where that Methylene Blue, been around a long time, known for being cleansing. Now, maybe that's a spiritual ritual in their situation, but it is actually a antidote for fighting viruses, for cleansing something. But you're going to be blue. You're going to have a blue tongue. I don't have that blue tongue today. The next place in history that you got to see a bunch of credit given to Methylene Blue was during the discovery and discussions of tuberculosis and malaria. One of the ways the soldiers in the military were checked that they were taking it was the doctor would look at their pee because it was blue. If they were being compliant with the tincture, then they would pee blue. And like I said earlier, at autopsy, we would see a couple of organs with really high mitochondria, the brain and the heart, turn blue. All right, next thing was a virus warrior, looking at that cytokine response being toxic and actually sometimes good for the virus, bad for the human. And we just see not only a antiseptic component to Methylene Blue, but if we wanted to see any of this under the microscope, which is where the malaria team really became aware of it, is they stained the tissue with Methylene Blue in hopes to be able to see the little critter, the malaria organism on the slide. Same with tuberculosis. Very difficult to see, but when you use Methylene Blue, you could see it more clearly. The next is that pain relief that I talked about. When you have the chronic inflammatory problems of a joint that's not going that's going sideways. When I look at the number of people that say, "Why did you take Methylene Blue?" and I've been watching some of these to say, "Did you take it for joint pain? Did you take it because you wanted to see if a pain could be reversed?" And if you took one dose and the pain went away, for sure that was placebo. It doesn't work that quickly. As I took a whole like 15 droplets of this to take that thumbnail where my tongue was blue for like the next hour and a half, I felt high. I felt like not only do I have high ketones, but I now just added Methylene Blue, which, maybe it enhanced the way that those electrons or those protons are being transferred over that mitochondrial membrane. I don't know, but my team was like, we were trying to record a video that's going to come out later, and I was like, my speech was super fast. I had to really think about slowing down. But I've been playing with this for about 3 weeks. And when I first started with it, I noticed the blue pee right away, right? I even was really careful to not spill it on anything. And I've said to my team, good Lord, just don't let me spill this while I'm on the live. I'm going to take this out. I'm afraid to put it down because wherever it touches, it's going to be blue. But as you look at the taste of it, it doesn't have much of a taste. It just turns things blue. So it probably took about 3 weeks, or no, it probably took about the better part of 5 days for me to know that as a physician, one of the places that early in my career was, do I have the answer for the problem? Okay. And I know that y'all hate on, doctors are just connecting these two. But at the beginning, especially I was planning on going into the ICU, so I wasn't planning on doing primary care. But now I was in primary care. And I was just trying to match up. This problem goes to this, what these symptoms go to these problems without ordering a bunch of tests. And when you look at the first joint to fail in most people, it is the base of the thumb, the base of the thumb. And my left-hand base of the thumb, it's begun to hurt over the last couple of years. But when I remember back in the first few years of practice, whenever the base of the thumb would hurt, I would instantly be able to say, it's osteoarthritis, ibuprofen, anti-inflammatories, use some ice. So, I would quickly file it in here, you're aging. Okay, let's get to the problems that are going to kill you. Yep, that's part of aging. And I really hardly gave it more of a thought than that. And then there's payback. So as I'm 54 now, but a couple years ago, I could start to feel that the base of my thumb would hurt. And in fact, on Easter Sunday, my 3 boys and I went golfing. 4 of us playing best ball. That's how good we are at golf. It was great. But by the end of the golf round, I couldn't grip the golf club as tightly as I could at the beginning. Why? Because the base of the thumb was hurting. When I look at the change that I saw within 5 days of starting this, I noticed that, that thumb doesn't hurt as much. And I didn't test it with a golf round, but it does help me to say, that's probably what folks are experiencing. All right, so hang in there. There's a couple more things we're going to cover. And then we're going to get to this. Does Methylene Blue cause serotonin syndrome? Okay, we're going to come back to that in just a second. That is what, if you Google, what's the enemy of the Methylene Blue? What's the danger? What's the problem? We're going to talk about, is it real? I bet you'll be surprised by my answer. Okay, so I do want to show off something that I am excited for. As the mother of 3 and a daughter and friends with lots and lots of mothers, there are several of you that are may or may not be aware that in 4 weeks is Mother's Day, and we are doing an excellent sale on my favorite thing to give moms, which is our glow serum. So it is usually $150. It is something that I use frequently, and I took a risk putting a product that doesn't have anything to do with the ketogenic state on the market, but it's because I think this should be in every person. This is the only thing I use on my skin. It is the oils that do penetrate those top layers of skin. And although I can't make my skin glow like this if my mitochondria weren't healthy, it sure bridges when maybe when I'm not perfect, but also I'm 54 years old. I want my skin to look great. And I don't want to spend $100 for this thimble-sized version of that. This is designed to use frequently, and know that the first time you put it on skin that hasn't seen it, it will feel oily for the first 20 minutes. But then it does penetrate through that skin layer, and some of my favorite reviews of any product I've ever made have been this product. So we are putting it on sale between now and Mother's Day. If you are looking for the best gift, I would love the support for the channel, but I'd also love to hear the reviews of that. Okay, I also had something on Dr. Boz favorites I was supposed to tell you. Oh, I know what it was. So many of you know that, first of all, there's Methylene Blue if you want to do that. It's just the link to Amazon, but it shows you which Methylene Blue I'm using here. I have a couple of major videos coming out about continuous glucose monitors. So if you don't have one and you're looking for the prescription one, the good one, oh, I thought it was sitting here, the G7, and you want a prescription for that, my team and I in Meaningful Medicine make this a very user-friendly way to get the one you can calibrate, which is the one I trust. But next I want to show you something here called Carb Sober Cruising. This is by a friend of mine who is kind of new in my universe, and I am... Dr. Lisa. I was like, oh, what's her first name? Dr. Lisa is leading a carb sober cruise. But the interesting thing is it is right after, if you've been to Hack Your Health, it is now called, it's called Hack Your Health now. It used to be called KetoCon. And Hack Your Health is in Tampa in November, and that's on like a Saturday and a Sunday, and it is again one of my favorite conferences. It's tons of fun. I've become good friends with the gal who runs it, and I just think she does an excellent job. But what happens in Tampa at the end of that is this cruise where there is a lot of hangout sessions with the speakers, and it takes off right out of Tampa. So 2 days of a really great conference learning about how you can hack your health, and then head off on a carb sober cruise. And again, this is a smaller organization, so it will fill up. It's not a huge cruise ship, and it's not designed to be super didactic. It's meant to be, lots of Q&As with their speakers. So I don't know if I get to be one yet, and I mean that because of my schedule, not hers. But if I do, a Q&A with me on some of the sailing days, and then it's just time spent. What does it look like to eat no carbs for a week? Now, there's ways you can break that. It's not like they're the carb police, but I just think it's a powerful teaching when you watch somebody model the behavior you're trying to become better at. So if you're looking for that, the season's right. It's in Tampa in November. And it's right after Hack Your Health. So 2 ladies I am very excited to support. All right, let's get back to, does methylene blue cause serotonin syndrome? This is probably the number one thing I saw in, several of the influencers out there saying, oh, is this this is the true problem with this. Let's talk about serotonin syndrome and why methylene blue might be at all affecting that. So methylene blue, first of all, serotonin syndrome is when serotonin goes rather high relative to what you experience, what you're used to, and causes, I think of it as like the motor is really high in their brain. So their temperature can go high, their heart rate can go high. I mean, it can be deadly if we can't back them off the cliff. But methylene blue is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Monoamine oxidases are enzymes, and they break down neurotransmitters in your brain. We have monoamine oxidase A and monoamine oxidase B. So it kind of adds a little chain on each of these. The monoamine oxidase A enzyme breaks down serotonin, breaks down norepinephrine. The monoamine oxidase B predominantly breaks down dopamine. So there are two pathways, and these are really important when you are manipulating your serotonin. That when we look at monoamine oxidase enzymes, that is part of it's normal. That's what we have to have. You can't have that in your body at all. You can't have serotonin and norepinephrine in the body and not be able to break them down. But when we look at the types of monoamine oxidase, that I is really important. The monoamine oxidase inhibitors, we look for those that are reversible and then those that are irreversible. Reversible means, okay, it binds to that enzyme and stops it from breaking down that neurotransmitter, and then something shifts in the chemistry and it breaks away. It is a reversible bind of this enzyme. There are prescriptions that I call these old school prescriptions because monoamine oxidase inhibitors, they're nothing as easy to use as to prescribe as Prozac or Paxil or Zoloft or Lexapro. So they're old. They are irreversible. Now, once you bind to that monoamine oxidase inhibitor, that enzyme will not break down serotonin anymore, and the serotonin will start to rise. Now, in part, that's how they're treating the depression. They're raising the serotonin in the brain. They're raising the norepinephrine in the brain. And I know with all of the recent, is that how Prozac works? But who cares? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying raising of serotonin inside the human brain changes how you function, how you think. And in healthy people, like I took that shot to take the thumbnail and my tongue turned blue. And I'm like energized, like, okay, I wouldn't call it mania, but my speech was fast and I was like having a tough time sitting still. Like, I got to go for a walk. I got to walk off some of this energy. Some of the old school monoamine oxidase inhibitors, the prescriptions are phenelzine and selegiline. Both of those, so I do not prescribe those. I think I've written them once or twice as refills early in my career, and then like, that's a lot. This one I've never even heard of. I Googled it, and indeed it is a reversible molecule where it doesn't stick. So the key thing that I always think is important is if you do inhibit an enzyme in an irreversible way. So you took out the crop of enzymes that are breaking down serotonin. Now to restore those enzymes, it is a long road. It is a long road. Weeks before those enzymes are back in the brain functioning very tightly. So an irreversible monoamine oxidase inhibitor would be at high risk for serotonin syndrome. So what is methylene blue? Well, it's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. It is reversible, and it can be knocked out by other factors. So as soon as the pH changes or anything else comes along to touch that enzyme, or even just the temperature rises inside a body, you can see that connectivity between the enzyme and methylene blue undo. So it makes it safer. I think it is important to recognize that methylene blue is strong in the monoamine monoamine oxidase A, which is your serotonin team, your norepinephrine team, and not so much in the dopamine. I mean, it's not like it doesn't affect dopamine enzyme inhibition, but it's not as high. So punchline, reversible monoamine oxidase inhibitors are regarded as safer. That it's not as profound. All right, so before we go into this one, the last thing we're going to talk about is, all right, so you get into this world of methylene blue. I'm trying to get this done by the time I finish this video. A little bit blue. Okay. With the places that I've looked at this. So first of all, I totally put it in, had it put in the Starbucks of the people I work with, and they peed blue on April Fools. Yes. And I wasn't worried about hurting them. It is a reversible monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And the amount that I put in their coffee to turn them blue was like 10 drops. It was very little. But as I started taking this over the next couple of weeks, and I had my husband take it, and I had one of my kids take it, saying, I just want to see how you feel. And then I was reading about this, like, okay, I get what it's doing when there's a strong amount of damage done to the body. This is where this has been used. I've seen several protocols where They're looking at the damage done by radiation for a treatment of cancer, and that the amount of free radicals is just a lot for that person to handle. They're not healthy enough to really keep that energy flowing through their mitochondria. And in fact, some of the mitochondria are being sacrificed because of the shift and the just incredible number of free radicals in their system. And I've seen protocols where they're using methylene blue as a way to temper those hydrogen ions and really shuffle them along that internal membrane of the mitochondria. Most common thing I see online is the reversal of an inflammatory joint that's been chronically inflamed, and it's not on the first day. It takes 3 or 4 days before they start to feel it. By the end of the first week, you can often feel it. And I have some other places where I think it is very interesting, but I'm going to leave it off of here and see if it's in the questions, and we'll answer that. I will do one last thing, which is show you the dosing. Loom slides. Here we go. Let's see if I can make my head a lot smaller here. So if you look at the body weight over here of kilograms and 110. Let's see here. 110, 120s. So the highest recommended effective dose would be 2 milligrams per kilogram. So that's this column right here. We think the minimum effective dose is going to be here. You can go, the people who have problems are like 10 times the dose of that. And it can overwhelm those enzymes breaking down serotonin. Again, it is reversible. There's lots of things that can be done to offset that. But looking at the weight that you're at here in kilograms versus pounds, if you look at a 0.5 milligram per kilogram, that's about, let's take 120 pounds, 55 drops a day. So right before I got on here, you saw me put 10-ish drops into my that liquid. And then for the thumbnail earlier today, I think I had about 10, I had a dropper full, like 10 drops of methylene blue. So that's 20 drops of methylene blue. So if my weight's about this range, I'm still not at a 0.5 milligram per kilogram per day. To get all the way up to 220, I don't know that I can do that. I don't know that I can do that. All right, so let's go back to our chat here really quick. Let me shuffle things around. I do want to make sure I tell you again, I skipped a lot of stuff. There's some really interesting stories as I look at Mark's biography. He's got some other books that I have on my list that I'll probably read, but he is a independent health researcher. So take a look, give him a shout out if you have any connections to him, to say thank you. And the link in the show notes just allows you to get to his Amazon place where he's selling that book. Okay, let's get over to your questions. Oopsie, let's try that again. Questions here. All right. Now I'm ready. Okay, Sam writes in and says, I've been reading about methylene blue being used for some cases for inflammation of pain. Do you think that there's any potential role in managing joint issues? Yeah, I would tell you, Sam, this is the number one place that I've been impressed. I mean, I don't like to put drugs in me either, but I don't like that thumb pain. I do want to golf with my kids a little bit more. I'm not interested in stem cell injections, at least not at this stage. But I do see that it bothers me. When I look at the volume of people that's why they first did this, I find it's quite, that's the majority, is they're doing it for the pain relief, and with pretty good anecdotal responses. I mean, there's some really great studies out there that are looking further into that mitochondrial dysfunction, but nobody's really looking at it for joint issues. So it's really been an anecdotal response that I've learned from. How long do you take it? Once I stop, will the results stop? That's a great question, first of all. Looking at the length of time for it to help is another place where I didn't mention earlier is, have you ever seen people use it in their fish tanks? Again, that antiviral, that antiseptic that doesn't kill the fish, but does keep that fish tank clean. I think the virus the infection is called ick that gets inside a fish tank, and methylene blue is the antidote. And so you look at people that have been exposed to this for a while, and they'll say things like, oh, I think my joint pain is better. And they're just working with it. Now, their skin is blue if they're working with it, but it's very strange to hear that again and again and again, even with a topical application of it. How long do you take it? I would at least give yourself 4 weeks of this. I take it in the morning. I did well, then Easter came, and I didn't do so well over the weekend, but I'm back to trying to be rhythmical about it again. And I have a commitment of saying I want 4 consecutive weeks of trying to get to at least a 0.5 milligram per kilogram per day. So that's going to be a dropper, 2 droppers in the morning. How I like to do it is kind of what you saw here, is a small amount of liquid, because it does not have an aftertaste, but it does have a taste. So if I can get it down as quickly as possible, it's kind of a bitter taste. I usually chase it with some bubble water, some sparkling water, and then I'm off to do my day and have my coffee and do other things. So I do it in the morning. When I've taken it at night, I feel like it makes me have to go to the bathroom. And I don't mean like the volume of urine. It's like I feel the need to urinate. And so I try not to do it right before bed. I learned that the hard way, kind of. All right, next question. Is how does this affect people with alpha thalassemia? So again, alpha thalassemia is a hemoglobinopathy, where the hemoglobin it's got a defect in it. And if I remember alpha hemoglobinopathy, they have a increased binding of the oxygen. It won't release the oxygen as quickly, or maybe it was an increased binding of the carbon monoxide. Or carbon dioxide, or not carbon dioxide. It's an increased binding of the oxygen. I'd have to look again. I don't know the answer to that. I like questions that make me look things up, though, so I'll look it up. What percentage is safe to use? Is Jensen Violet the same? I don't think Jensen Violet is the same. If somebody in the chat knows that answer, I'm watching the answers in the chat in another screen here, so I don't think it's the same. Julie writes in, will methylene blue mess up my pea sticks that I'm using for Dr. Anna Kabecka? I did get a message from Anna Kabecka's team saying, hey, these folks of yours that you sent our way, they are all worried about being more than 20 carbs per day. They're worried that their insulin resistance is not going to handle more than 20 carbs per day, and they actually want to stay carnivore. And I sent them back a video saying, they're right. They are very insulin resistant. Don't push them higher than they should. But if you look at what Anna Kabecka does, and again, this is the gal who is Magic Menopause, really works with female hormones, has a much higher level of understanding and passion to really answer some of the female hormone questions. I am superficial. I mean, I do what I do, but I don't have the space to do it for the volume of people that Dr. Kabecka is working on. And what she looks at is taking care of patients that are going through menopause, and she has a lot of the same like core beliefs in that you must change the pH of the system in order for those fat-based hormones to circulate. The reduction of insulin will decrease will improve that metabolism, will increase the ketones, decrease that blood glucose, and in the urine, the pH will shift. And so the way she measures compliance, I make you prick your finger and put your numbers up there. That's a much more strict and again, many people are kind of repelled by that level of commitment, but I don't back away from that. I really think there's, for the patients that come to see me, they're sick. They've been insulin resistant for years. Their mitochondria are exactly like that picture in the slides. They are broken. Those protons escape out and do naughty things. And if you want to reverse that, you have to stay in a state of repair. Urine is, on the spectrum, on that pendulum of saying, okay, we can measure that they're in the right place. I just take it way further because my patients are much sicker than folks going through menopause and trying to get their hormones reversed. So the question is, was it going to screw up the pee sticks? I'm pretty sure her pee stick, I mean, it will turn them blue, but I'm pretty sure her pee sticks are measuring the pH of the urine. So I don't think it will shift that. I want to ask ChatGPT though, because I've never thought about that. Okay, let's go to the next question. Aloha 22, you are just a regular. I love seeing you ask the questions, and I'm glad your question made the list. So I am a regular red powder, which is red blood cell. Greater need for that than whole blood donor. So he or she is a regular red powder donor via the Red Cross. Would ingesting methylene blue cause them to reject my donation? So here's what I know about whole blood. So methylene blue, although it does reduce the ferrous from the 3+ to the 2+, it does not bind in the place that the oxygen does. It just allows the iron to put the oxygen there. One of the places we can see binding for methylene blue. Again, at autopsy, we see it brain and in the heart. There are other places, but those two are super concentrated. Why? Because they have a very high mitochondrial load. If you were look at the mass of the heart relative to muscle mass and mitochondrial mass, it is one of the highest organs, the highest density organs for mitochondria is your heart. And that's how we stay alive, right? Methylene blue has an affinity to that mitochondrial inner lining. So it would be a rejection for a heart transplant. I don't even know that it would be a rejection for a heart transplant, but your red blood cells don't have a place for that to anchor. It does affect the iron that's in that and allows that oxygen to rebind in carbon monoxide poisoning. But I don't think there's a binding of it. So I don't know. That's a good question. Not a fun. All these questions are going to send me studying for the next week. All right. Brian writes in next and says, is it safe with other meds? Is there anything we can't take with them? Well, I'll tell you, because this is a YouTube channel and I am not your doctor, that if I had to look at the places, I would still put restrictions or put caution, as I would talk to your doctor if you're taking an SSRI or an SNRI. Those are drugs that inhibit the reuptake or the vacuum of recycling serotonin in your brain or norepinephrine in your brain. Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Celexa, Lexapro, citalopram, Effexor, I'm forgetting several actually. But those are the kinds of antidepressant medications that I would definitely be talking with your doctor about that. But when I see some of the other influencers out there saying you can't take it with that, I am very cautious to say this is not an irreversible binder of a monoamine oxidase inhibition. It is reversible. And then this is over the counter, been around for a couple thousand years. Prozac been around since mid-80s, and maybe it's 90s. I think it's the 80s. If people were taking methylene blue and Prozac, there would have been a much bigger signal if the serotonin syndrome was actually happening. I did some searches trying to find some case reports, and you'd have to drink the whole stinking bottle to have, you just have to do a lot. And I got a pretty strong stomach. I'm like, that's enough. I don't want to, that's enough. It's got a very bitter taste. Again, skip the tongue, get it in your stomach and chase it with some bubble water. That's what I do. So I think anytime you take a medication or something that does actually get into the mitochondria, you should talk with your doctor. And this is a YouTube channel telling you all the things I wouldn't want to get in trouble for. All right. Grace says, is methylene blue better than blueberries for inflammation? Hell yes. Can I swear? Hell yes. This is a perfect example of where acai berry used to drive me nuts. There was a multi-level marketing company in Utah that would sell all products that are byproducts of acai berry. And they would tout that they reversed cancer. You pour it on your body, it was going to improve you. And I'm like, it is not getting to the mitochondria. You can't even start this conversation until you prove that little antioxidant gets to the mitochondria. And what I've noticed with blueberries is, yes, there are antioxidants in blueberries, but my people that watch this channel, they like food too much and they love the buzz of food. They eat the whole dang box of blueberries. And And they do it with hedonistic joy. Like, it's not just a satisfy this anti-inflammatory. This is their, I can't have fruit except I know this is good. And then they eat more and they eat more. And then their sugars are high and their ketones are down and their insulin is off the charts. And they're creating those mitochondria with those little holes in them instead of reversing them. So Grace, thanks for that. And my team is just smiling right now because they would know that I would eat that one up. Last question by Dale. Would it help a skin infection? Would I put it on the skin? You know, I wish Colonel Alk was on this show with me, Dale, because he also had me reading about another thing that I hope to do a live on, or at least a discussion on. Oh, I bet you it's here. Ha, it is here. So before you go buy Methylene Blue and turn yourself into a Smurf, this was the other thing he told me to read. I've started, don't ask me questions about it, but the first 10 pages make me say, I don't know about skin infection. It would sting like hell, I bet. But there are other things that can get you, when the fish tank people use it in the fish tank and their skin turns blue because the water is got blue dye in it, but the ick inside the fish tank did go away. So there is this antiseptic process to it. You know, the other major finding was looking under a microscope, we're dyeing tissue to find malaria, to find that tuberculosis, which is super tiny, difficult to find, you know, hides in like very camouflage place for us to see it under the microscope. But the methylene blue helped us see it. And those same scientists said, oh my, they're dying. So there's this reversal of the malaria. The survival of malaria was reversed with that as well. All right, troops, I am super thankful for everybody that's tuned in to this point. I am also going to be watching to see how well the Mother's Day gifts go out. I really appreciate the support for the channel, and I will use your questions to keep studying for future lives. So please keep putting the questions in the chat, even when I'm not here, even on replay, because it gives me good ideas for what you want to hear from going forward. I'll see you guys next week. Sign up.